over to you.
All right. Thanks, thanks, Amitji, and hello and very warm welcome to everyone. Uh, Again, so this is the third session for 1970 War series. I'm not sure who all have gone through the first two sessions, so let me do a quick recap for everyone. This will be really fast because it takes a lot of time, so I'll not spend a lot of time in each and everything in details, but yeah, just browse through the slides so that it refreshes in everyone's memory. So what's this about? Can I close this, Amitji? Okay.
I think I have just moved it so that the other
Okay.
room. I'm not sure if this closes the other room, so let's leave it
Okay.
there. Maybe side of the screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
So right. So this is not about any blaming or maligning any name, place, person, or religion. Neither we are asking any questions or raising doubts what has been done and how it has been done in past. It is just that we are trying to learn few things from our past, and so that we can develop some more knowledge about what has been our past like. We should respect our leaders, our nation, and our armed forces. So all these references have been quoted. In case I have not quoted anything by mistake, I apologize. So this is the 1971 war. So we talked in past two session. We talked what happened before the war, what happened in the war, and now today we'll focus on what happened uh, towards the end of the war and later on. Right. So these are the key actors during the war. I explained them who all of them are. So I'll leave it at there. So feel free to. By the way, both these sessions are recorded and published on YouTube. So feel free to go back and see if there is anything. So this is where I explained the topography, how various entities are placed geographically, and the limitations and advantages of countries like East Pakistan, West Pakistan, and India. Then there was a stark comparison between East and West Pakistan, and how, despite being more fruitful and productive, East Pakistan was at a disadvantage, and West Pakistan was treating it as its own colony. So moving ahead, then due to all this injustice, there was an uprising within East Pakistan for a freedom movement led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, leader of opposition, leader of Awami League, and later he was also known as father of Bangladesh because of his movement. It all Bangladesh actually happened. So then Pakistan opened with Operation Searchlight. Incidentally, today we are exactly at 50th year. So today is 26th March, and this Operation Searchlight happened on the night of 25th March 1971. So 71 and today is 2021. So we are exactly spot on at the 50th year of this whole event that we are talking. It's a coincidence. I was just it just came across my mind while I was just doing things. So yeah, so then all this genocide thing came out in paper by Anthony Mascarenhas and in UK Sunday Times newspaper, and that's how everything came out in open. And then Indira Gandhi asked her army chief to wage a war, on which he declined due to his own various reasons. And then we were preparing for in April and March. This all uprising happened, and the mass exodus happened, and Indian border state like Assam and West Bengal had a lot of immigrant crisis. Around 10 million immigrant came to Indian border by November 71. So we formed secret services, we infiltrated and we trained Mukti Bahini, we gave them arms, we gave them training. So that's, I mean, Indian army supported the local uprising and trained them to fight their own war. And in the international arena, US and UK and all the major Western countries were supporting Pakistan. China was also supporting Pakistan for obvious reasons. Our only savior was USSR at that moment. So this is Henry Kissinger making a trip to China, which was facilitated by Pakistan. And then India got warmed towards USSR, and then signed a historic 20 years Indo-Soviet Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation, which actually proved very beneficial in this 1971 war. And then Pakistan declared the war. Operation Genghis Khan was launched, where preemptive airstrikes.
Pakistan launched a full-scale war against.
So Pakistan launched Pakistan Air Force launched preemptive airstrikes on our air bases, critical air bases, and then India responded on the our side on December 3rd, and then the war formally started. We spoke about Battle of Longewala, on which border movie is based, and then we also talk about Battle of Basantar. This was on the eastern side. Battle of Longewala was the western front. So Pakistan opened western front because it was not so strong on the eastern front. So it thought the thought process was that Indian army will get diverted on both the fronts, but things didn't turn their way. The war was also going on on the air, on the field, on the land, and on the water as well. So we launched Operation Trident and bombed Karachi harbor. This actually fizzled Pakistani preparedness, or whatever they were planning to do, harm, whatever little harm they were planning to do, they couldn't do, because all of the harbor, and this was the main harbor where all the oil supplies and everything was there for reinforcement. Oil supplies and everything was bombed by Indian Navy. We followed it with Operation Python, and then further destroyed Karachi harbor and neighboring places. Right. So this is the Vinash missiles that were launched on Karachi harbor. So then we talked about the story of PNS Ghazi, the Pakistan prized marine submarine, and on its maiden journey, we just due to our intelligence and close cooperation between various bodies, we just took off. We striked. So Pakistani PNS Ghazi was aimed to destroy INS Vikrant, which was our only aircraft carrier and the main battleship. But we took off PNS Ghazi on its maiden journey. It's a very interesting story. I asked you to just go through that if you have time. It's an event of deceit and spying. So then on the eastern front, we were marching ahead. We destroyed Pakistanis and many places like Chittagong, Cox's Bazar, and all these strategic places. We bombed. Our army and air force and navy all were on top of eastern side. So we were marching really aggressively. So we occupied Bangladesh or East Pakistan at that time on all three sides, northern, eastern, and western sides. And on the southern side, anyways, our Indian Navy was causing havoc. So Pakistani were really scared. So almost all strategic places were occupied and being struck by Indian Army. Right. So we spoke about that. So this is just Henry Kissinger's statement as to how bad the situation is. And then we are here. So now, so we have gained significant ground on the eastern side of the Pakistan, East Pakistan. Indian Army gained significant side, and things were not working out well for Pakistan. So what happened by the end of first week of war? So now, now officially we are starting with third session. So I request you all to be with me. So yeah, by the end of first week of waging war against India, Pakistan's situation got really grim, as we saw in our previous slides, right? So nothing was working out for them. So Pakistan, what it could do? US and UK was supporting Pakistan along with the Western allies. So it was persistently asking for ceasefire. So it was Pakistan who was asking for a ceasefire in the United Nations. But thanks to Soviet Union at that time, who was the only country who was vetoing that ceasefire motion. Right. So at that time, when all this was going on and Pakistan's situation was really grim, at that time, United States, US decided to scare off Indian armed forces by deploying its world's largest warship in Bay of Bengal. So, and this was the world's largest. There was none other warship in comparison to United States 7th Fleet, which it decided on December 10th to. So on December 10th, Indian intelligence intercepted a message that United States has decided to deploy its 7th Fleet in the war zone, right? So there was a confusion in the name, as it was popularly known as 7th Fleet. Some Soviet documents called it as Task Force 74. You will also see it being called as Carrier Task Force, because officially United States said that it is being deployed to rescue the United States citizens that are trapped in East Pakistan. That's why it termed as Carrier Task Force, to carry the United States people. But it was officially the United States 7th Fleet. It was at that time it was deployed in Gulf of let me take the laser pointer. Yeah, it in the Gulf of Tonkin here, and then the plan was that it will move this 7th Fleet and deploy it in Bay of Bengal to challenge INS Vikrant, right? So this 7th Fleet, just to give you an idea, it was led by 75,000-ton nuclear power aircraft carrier called USS Enterprise. And it was, as I already told you, it was the world's largest warship at that time, and it carried more than 70 fighters and bombers aircrafts, right? And it also included guided missiles, cruisers, warships, amphibious assault ships, all sorts of things was accompanied in this fleet. And in sync with the United States Navy, UK Navy also started to move to support US. So and they Pakistani and because it was supporting US, but we both know that because in the garb of things they were supporting Pakistan. So Soviet intelligence reported that a British naval ship, as you can see here, has started to move in Arabian Sea, and along with a couple of aircraft carriers like HMS Eagle and HMS Albion. So there were several destroyer ships accompanied this as well. So plan was basically to capture to trap India on the eastern side, on the western side in the Arabian Sea by this UK fleet, and on the eastern side in the Bay of Bengal by USS 7th Fleet, right? So that was the plan. And against all this, with barely 20 light aircraft, India's 20,000-ton aircraft carrier INS Vikrant was standing tall between the Indian cities and American warships. That was on its voyage to Bay of Bengal. So, I mean, the situation was really grim at that time for us. And then it was then when Indira Gandhi reached to Moscow and asked to invoke Soviet Union, the defense treaty that we signed back in August, right? So, and on December 30th, because of this, Russia agreed, and it also dispatched a nuclear armed flotilla. So now Russian 10th Operative Battle Group, that was known as Pacific Fleet, from Vladivostok under the command of Admiral Vladimir Kruklev. It was dispatched to in the waters of Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean, right, to support Indian fleet. And though Russian fleet, so this is somewhere, I mean, this is my guess after all the reading, somewhere it was here. So though the Russian fleet comprised of a good number of nuclear and armed ships and atomic submarines, their missile were of limited range, around 300 kilometers. So I mean, in order to counter UK and US fleets, which were really advanced, the Russian commanders had to take a risk of being within the range of American fleet. That means that, I mean, if it would have come to worse, then they would have been in the close range of attack from both of them. But yes, they took a chance. So while all this was happening on the waterfront, coming back to the land, we have crippled East Pakistani forces from all sides, right? And we're marching towards Dhaka. So Dhaka was the capital of East Pakistan, and once Dhaka was captured, it was all done deal for Pakistan, right? So, but we got intelligence that 93 Brigade of Pakistani Army is marching towards Dhaka to provide reinforcement. So from north they were starting to reach Dhaka to provide reinforcement to their to East Pakistani Army. Now, in order to counter the 93 Brigade of the Pakistani Army, Indian Battalion, 2nd Battalion of 2 Para of Indian Army's Parachute Regiment was given task to capture a strategic bridge to. So this was a parachute regiment that was tasked to capture a strategic bridge in order to obstruct the movement of the Pakistani army that was moving towards Dhaka, because I mean that was very important, because if they would have reinforced, then entire plan would have gone bad, right? So yeah, so we did a so as I was saying, 2 Para of Indian Army Parachute Regiment was airdropped at 14:30 at 16:30 hours on 11th of December, and it was actually greeted by a jubilant crowd of local people. So people went crazy when they saw Indian paratroopers fly landing on their soil. They also supported, they helped troops by carrying their backpacks and ammunition. So it was a scene of euphoria among the local people. Now what happened was, so this was just a battalion, right? So but BBC, who happened to be a very credible news agency at that time, because obviously Indian news were Pakistan termed Indian news as Indian in Indian favor, and obviously Pakistani news has no credentials. So BBC was the neutral and the most authentic news service which both Indian and Pakistani relied on. Now BBC reported somehow that there are 5,000 paratroopers were landed at the strategic location at Tangail. Now this, and actually only 500 around 540 paratroopers were landed. Now this, because it was coming from BBC, Pakistani got really scared. So this caused a scare among Pakistani authorities, and that was a psyche their psyche was destroyed, because I mean 5,000 paratroopers airdropped in the soil, so they really got spooked off. So on 13th of December, the American again placed the resolution of ceasefire at United Nations, which was again vetoed by Soviet Union. And at that time, Indian Army was running out of time, because the US 7th Fleet was all coming, and we were I mean, though we were at a good position, but it takes a lot of ammunition, it takes a lot of economics to sustain the advantage, right? So our army chief of staff, Eastern Army, General JFR Jacob, got hold of GOC Eastern Command. His name was General A.K. Niazi on wireless, and he asked him to surrender. Again, this was a pressure tactic, right? So he asked him to surrender. He said that, okay, Dhaka is occupied by all 3 sides. Mukti Bahini is creating an uprising. You better surrender, otherwise we cannot guarantee your safety and security. And Pakistani were already psychologically very they were in a psychological fear at that time. And on top of that, there is another incident that happened on December 14th. Indian intelligence intercepted a signal originated by Governor of Pakistan, East Pakistan. His name was A.M. Malik. So he was calling for a high-level meeting with all the key stakeholders of East Pakistan, including A.K. Niazi, who was the General Officer Command of East Pakistan. Now, this was a very strategic meeting, and Indian Army, because Indian intelligence got that signal, and Indian Air Force was asked to do an immediate airstrike on the Governor House at Dhaka. But they were also asked to not do any collateral damage, like no civilian lives should be lost, and just Governor House should be striked. Now this was one of its kind meeting with all the key stakeholders, major stakeholders of East Pakistan, and IF hunters and MiG-21s carried out a pinpoint attack on the governor's house, right? So this really, again, I mean, they were already psychologically down, and then there's such a high profile meeting was bombed and attacked at the governor house, which was supposed to be one of the most secure places in East Pakistan. Just after this attack, governor of East Pakistan, A.M. Malik, just gave his resignation immediately, right then and there. He gave his resignation. He abdicated all government responsibilities and fled under the protection of Red Cross, International Red Cross. So there was no, there was a lack of leadership at that time in East Pakistan, and Lieutenant General, I mean General A.K. Niazi was only left to lead the whole scenario, the whole situation at that time. So A.K. Niazi was under immense pressure at that time on December 14th, after this whole strike and paratroop thing. Right. So yeah, so this is all happened, what all happened in the background. So time was running out. December 14th and 15th, after the bombing, as I said, Niazi became the highest working official in East Pakistan. There was panic among Pakistan. So they went to their good friend America. So they went to American Council General with the proposal of ceasefire. When I say they, I mean General A.K. Niazi again in East Pakistan. So they went to ceasefire, and then listen, the ceasefire proposal was very very I should say funny. So they were proposing ceasefire under United Nations. They were proposing withdrawal of all troops under United Nations, handover of the government to United Nations, and they were also saying that no war crime trials should be executed on these guys. Now, okay, so when American Council had this proposal, so it related to Islamabad, and Islam and this Zulfikar Ali Bhutto at that time, who happens to be the foreign minister, he was in New York at that time, trying to negotiate between US and China and doing all sorts of equations there. So he simply refused it. He was thinking, he was in his own plateau. He was thinking that things will go fine with Pakistan, right? So he refused the ceasefire proposal. Anyways, we also were not planning to agree to that. So on December 15th, there was another resolution tabled by Poland in the United Nations. But this was strategic because so Poland was a part of Soviet Union at that bloc, Soviet bloc, right? So this, because it was tabled by Poland, this on December 15th evening and December 16th morning our time. Now, this ceasefire resolution on December 15th and 16th was again tore by the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto literally tore this resolution into half, saying that this resolution, ceasefire resolution, is not condemning India as an aggressor, and he simply walked out of the council. So all the chances he simply rejected, right? And for us, to be honest, on our side, time was running out, as I said, and things could quickly go out of hand. So Sam Manekshaw at that time, he sensed all these things, and on December 16th, General Sam Manekshaw asked JFR Jacob, General JFR Jacob, to go and negotiate a surrender, right? So Pakistanis, as I said, in the eastern side were extremely scared already because they were feeling isolated and left out. There was no communication happening with them. They had no clue what was happening, and India leveraged this situation. Major General JFR Jacob, he ably negotiated surrender in just 4 hours. So after a few hours of convincing General Niazi of safety and security, he said that we will provide you all the safety and security, and we will take care of all the 90,000 Pakistani troops if you surrender unconditionally. And after all these negotiations of 4 hours, just in 4 hours, you can imagine, Major General Jacob gave Lieutenant General Niazi just 30 minutes to think over and sign the paper. So he actually literally left that surrender paper and walked out of the room. And he said that I'll come back in 30 minutes and I hope you do the right thing. So in his own words, there is a very good interview of Major General Jacob. He was saying that I was not very confident as to what will happen after 30 minutes. So I was just curious. I was really not sure that what will happen after 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, when he went inside the room, so he asked to General Niazi, General, do you accept this paper? He asked 3 times, and Niazi kept quiet. So he said that, okay, so this I accept it as a surrender, and you have to surrender in public. So Niazi said, no, I'll surrender in my office. So he said, no, you have to surrender in public. I have already given that instruction that you will have to surrender at the Dhaka race course in front of the people of Dhaka. So, and not only surrender, you have to provide, General A.K. Niazi has to provide guard of honor to Indian Armed Forces, right? So that was the deal, and A.K. Niazi had to accept the surrender. It was one of its kind surrender that. So let's hear.
West Pakistan forces have unconditionally surrendered in Bangladesh. Dhaka is now the free capital of a free country. The instrument of surrender was signed in Dhaka at 16:31 hours Indian Standard Time by Lieutenant General A.A.K. Niazi on behalf of the Pakistan Eastern Command. Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, GOC in command of the Indian and Bangladesh forces in the Eastern Theatre, accepted the surrender. The entire nation rejoices in this historic event.
So this was Indira Gandhi. This is a long. I took it out from our Akashvani All India Radio archives. So it's a long monologue from Indira Gandhi on that day. I just took out a snippet of it to just make you take back all these 50 years. What it would have been feeling at that time by listening to a prime minister. So yeah. So. So this surrender happened, and as you can see, it's all history. This surrender was unique. General A.K. Niazi was actually literally he had tears in his eyes, and the surrender was negotiated and signed in just 4 hours, and also it was a public surrender in history. So once the surrender happened, Indira Gandhi had no reason left to continue war, so she just announced unilateral ceasefire at that time, and the war was even held or stopped on the Western Front, where actually we have gained significant advantage during all these times. So meanwhile, as I told you that United States 7th Fleet was trying to make way into Bay of Bengal as it started on 10th of December. But it could never move further from Sri Lanka. So as you can see here, so this was the path of fleet, but it had to divert away from the Sri Lanka. So one of the funny story that is in records is told by a Russian commander who was, I think, present during that time. In his own words, he said that his commander-in-chief, the Russian commander, ordered them to lift their submarines, literally deliberately lift their submarines out of the water, just so that Americans can see them. So Americans and Brits can see them. So, and it was to demonstrate that they had nuclear submarine in the Indian Ocean. So when the nuclear submarine surfaced out of the water, they intercepted the UK, one of the UK ships commander saying that, okay, sir, we are too late here. There are Russian atomic submarines already in the ocean and a big collection of battle warships. So this bluff literally played off in favor of India, Russia, and the war in the oceans was literally diverted. It never actually happened. So 7th Fleet did nothing, and it moved back after a certain amount of time. So that was the surrender, but the story didn't ended here. So surrender happened, everything happened, we won the war, and the war, there was a ceasefire. But post Bangladesh, I mean, when Bangladesh was formed or about to be formed, when Pakistan lost, West Pakistan lost the war, Yahya Khan had to resign. So he resigned, and Bhutto, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, became the president of Pakistan. Now, it's a good, so Zulfikar Ali Bhutto is the only person who first became president of Pakistan, and then he became prime minister of Pakistan later on, and then he was hanged to death by Pakistan court of law. So he had a troublesome life, political life, but yeah, he holds some curious historical records in his name. So Bhutto wanted to initiate peace talks with India, and that's why he he wanted to have that kind of a negotiation peace talks with India. So there was a Shimla summit that was blocked and started booked for Pakistan. And so Shimla summit in 1972 in June-July timeframe was decided to happen between India and Pakistan. Now Bhutto, the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto came with his daughter Benazir Bhutto, who also happened to be Prime Minister of Pakistan later on. And he came with 84 delegates, imagine. So we have never seen any summit where a country comes with 84 delegates. And despite this, they were given a king-like welcome in India, as we are, like Atiti Devo Bhava. Benazir Bhutto had a different room altogether. Indira Gandhi took personal attention so to ensure that Benazir Bhutto is taken care of properly, and all those things happen. But anyways, so India wanted to convert, because India was in an upper hand, obviously. India wanted to convert the ceasefire line in Kashmir, and at that time, and call it an international border. So why India wanted to do that? In order to solve the Kashmir issue for good, right? But obviously, if it would have been called as international border, Pakistan never wanted this. So there were various round of discussions and talks happened in that summit, but no discussion was reached. In fact, there was a time when these talks were about to be broken, right? So on 1st of July late evening, 1st of July late evening in 1972, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto met with Indira Gandhi alone, and they had some agreement behind the scene. It is said that Bhutto played emotional card with Indira Gandhi and showed his helplessness. He downplayed himself. He showed his helplessness and said, "What will I do when I go back empty-handed in Pakistan? What will I show? How will I show my faces to my people?" And he made some promises that he will ensure that he will resolve Kashmir issue gradually, but not so abruptly, so that his political position is not compromised, right? So and Indira Gandhi fell for this and agreed to this. So on 2nd of July, surprisingly, because the talks were about to be broken, so on 2nd of July, Shimla agreement was signed between India and Pakistan, which was again very ambiguous and had very less for India. So it was talking about mutual commitment to the peaceful resolution of all issues through bilateral approaches, for cultural and trade exchange, uphold line of control, sanctity in Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, all vague points. There was nothing concrete in that agreement. So though India had an upper hand at that time, we could have played cards to our terms, but we didn't call the shots. We played overtly gracious to Pakistan, and once more, I mean, our we stuck true to our pacifist image of our nation. I mean, where we are never an aggressor, and in this case, I mean, we were rightful owners of calling the terms. So though we won the war, but Pakistan emerged as a winner in Shimla agreement. Pakistan got actually more than what it deserved, and we, despite being the victor, were feeling like vanquished at the end. So this is I've just taken a screenshot. The entire Shimla agreement is on our Ministry of External Affairs website. When you have time, feel free to go and read through it. You'll get to see what's inside it. It's really a platonic talk of cultural and political exchange, to be honest. So what happened? So after the Shimla agreement, I mean, we lost around 1,400 men and 4,000 were wounded. There is no reliable data on Pakistani losses, so I'll not talk about that. We returned all 93,000 Pakistani prisoners of wars respectfully. In fact, when these prisoners of war were in India, they were treated very respectfully, and we handed them over back respectfully. And India also returned 5,000 miles of Pakistani, around 5,000 miles of Pakistani territory that we occupied during the war. Kashmir issue, as we all know, still remains unresolved. On the contrary, we never got back our 54 prisoners of wars. They are still with Pakistan, and we have no clue of them till date. So yeah, this was the state of 1971 war after winning, and how it all ended up after the Shimla Agreement. So I think that culminates my session, but I mean, there is much more to it. I have not covered a lot of things. There are a lot of brave stories, Paramveer Chakras, Mahavir Chakras. I would recommend you to just search more into it and go to specific episodes. There can be sessions after sessions on each episode. So despite trying to keep it brief, I ended up doing 3 sessions on it, and I still want to learn and do more on this. I have just touched an iceberg, and in fact, I would like to go back and dwell more into 1971 war specifically. So yeah, that was it from my end. Over to you, Amitji. Thanks everyone. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Abhinavji. That's a brilliant session. Brilliant session. Any question, anyone? I know we are literally behind, but any question, anyone?
I have a question.